your name's Chandler. You work for Wormies. People call you Jet House Gardens. You've got a Bokashi company. What's the name of the Bokashi company?
Beer City Bokashi.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Here in
And
Beer City,
so
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
exactly. So you've got all these different names. You've got it's Chandler. What's your last name?
Michalsky.
Michalsky. I love it. All
Yep.
right. So I've been actually doing research on you because people have been telling me about you and your work through word of mouth. And
Awesome.
so it's a Cuauhtemoc Villa. I don't know if
Oh yeah.
Bokashi, EM, bioceramic guy, one of
Oh
my
man,
best
he's taught me so
friends.
much.
Oh, have you met him before?
No, not yet.
Not
Hopefully
yet. That's
soon.
right. We're gonna all hang out.
Dude.
And so he was telling me that I need to check out you, that we need to meet. And I just started peeling back the onion with Smiley's Garden, with Future Cannabis Project. And it was so cool because, people have asked me like what I would do if I was going to do a compost company.
Yep.
And it's like you went further than like what I was thinking and we'll get into all of it. But I'm just gonna start with like that final component. That is awesome. That is huge. And I think it's gonna change everyone's like perspective on how to work with compost. And I actually have another
Yep.
detail that I haven't heard on any of the podcasts yet with you, but it's gonna just give you more fuel for
Okay.
your fire over there at Wormies. So
Yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah.
start off with like what are you all doing at Wormies? What's the process for making compost? What are the stages? Because that alone is going to be revelatory to so many people listening, so many people watching and practicing compost.
Yep. So it starts off, we have a food scrap pickup service. And so we pick up from like 300 different residents around the city. And I think it's like 20, 25 businesses. And so Grand Rapids is a really cool growing city. There's a lot of like healthy food options out there. And so we're teaming up with some really, really cool restaurants and kombucha places and juice bars and getting some really quality inputs. And putting that through, we're mixing it with manure from local farms and wood chips and leaves from local tree services, landscaping companies that we trust, and mixing it all together, creating this wonderful compost that we actually put through the hot composting. And so it does get thermophilic for pathogen reduction and biomass reduction because of the manure and food scrap sources. But after that, I mean, we do realize that that hot composting is killing a lot of the good guys too. And so we do reintroduce, so we re-inoculate that hot compost with the kombucha scraps loaded full of the labs and the yeast and everything that has a big appetite, and mushroom compost, which is a huge input. We're teamed up with a couple gourmet mushroom growers here and have spent mushroom blocks, so myceliated sawdust. And so we add that in with the kombucha scraps. And what else? We add all the chunky stuff that we sift out of our old compost piles. So it's full of these wood chips, bones that have been in there, all the worms, cocoons. That's where all the life is. And so like that's the mother culture, because literally like I sift this stuff year after year and like, oh, I recognize that piece of wood that's in there, that bone that's in there, let it stay in there. And so like I don't have a ton of bones, but every now and then, there's some in there. And so it's just, pores upon pores, and it's acting as, Bokashi essentially, or as a biochar essentially. It's just a condominium for these microbes. And so the stuff that I'm putting back onto the piles is like this mother culture that's 4 years old. And so very, very complex microbes. And the more you sift out that chunky woody material and let it sit there, it explodes with mycelium. And because the fungi just takes over, they love all that stuff. And so we call it Wormies. We give credit to the worms, but we're teaming with the whole entire soil food web there. And we let these huge long windrows full of worms and mycelium and everything sit right connected to the ground and just let maximum diversity take hold.
And then
And then we add cover crop seeds.
yeah.
And so then once the decomposition is slowing down. You can't recognize any food scraps or anything. Um, we kind of flip it and say, okay, it's time to associate with these plants again. And so we have different grasses. We have a ton of squash. We have some volunteers that survive. So we started out, we had a pumpkin drive like 3 years ago now. And these kids came by and they smashed their pumpkins, and it was like so much fun for them. And then we fed all that to the worms. And so like every year now we've just had these volunteer pumpkin seeds from that pumpkin drive 3 years ago, and
Wow.
they just pop up and we chop it. And so now we're starting to like breed these pumpkin seeds in our compost, and they just come back year after year, and it's wonderful. But so all those huge squash leaves, the pumpkin leaves, they keep all that compost nice and protected. It's a cover crop in the physical sense. There's nice shade all over everything. The wind can still flow underneath it. It does take a lot of water out of the pile, and so we don't just let them grow as big as they want to. There is some chopping and dropping, and when you do that, it releases a lot of that moisture right back into it. But keeping the piles covered, as well as all those roots that are inside, pumping all those exudates, stimulating all those microbes, that's really where a lot more magic happens. And so like you have active mycorrhizae and whatnot because there's actually roots for it to
Hmm.
associate with. So much more, as you know.
Was that intentional, or like so many of us, when we have that worm compost and it's not breaking down all those seeds, there are things that grow, and sometimes that's our best plant.
Yeah, so definitely if people are used to like conventional compost that's been pasteurized or whatever, and they're used to no seeds in there, then we've gotten some complaints in the past and whatnot. And so it's like, it's just educating. Those seeds are really good. You can easily chop it and drop it or whatever, but they're pumping exudates in there. They're stimulating everything. And like, let's free cover crop for you. And so just, doing our part to educate our end customers, and saying, there's life in here. We're not going to pasteurize it. We're not going to bag it up for a long time and kill everything. It's
Right.
very full of life.
But it's also like nature is also teaching us that lesson, right? And we're just like
Absolutely.
being the picture frame. So, what kind of mushrooms, like what kind of gourmet mushrooms? Is it mostly like
Also,
oyster, or is it like shiitake?
yeah. So it's Michael Files Garden. I'll give him a shout out. It's my buddy Chris. He has some blue oysters, golden oysters, and then Michigan oysters, he calls them. And some oysters that he found here in Michigan and wild crafted. And they're delicious, white, big oyster mushrooms. And so, like, that's your IMO there. That's indigenous microbes from these
Mm.
oyster mushrooms that were found right here in the Michigan forest, like 20 minutes away. And so, like, there's a lot of those that pop up everywhere. But then, yeah, there's your shiitakes, namikos, uh, chestnuts. There's like 6 or 7 different gourmet strains that all pop up at different times. And so it's really cool. You'll see, like earlier this spring, we'd get big rains, and like not all of them would pop up. There'd be some that are more opportunistic in that specific little microclimate than others. And so, like, then the next week, as it gets warmer, there's a different flush right next to it. And so it's like all these blocks were buried, but like they prefer different temperatures and whatnot. And like, who
You
knows the
smash the
complexity of it.
blocks.
So yes and no. We do smash some of them. We do break others up into like tiny little, maybe like 3-inch pieces, and then we do leave some just completely full. And so like there's a variety of different benefits to that. It's like when you smash
Mm.
them up, the mycelium just starts, spreading out and looking for other food sources. But when you leave them all together, there's still a good amount of nutrients in there, and you can get some pretty big flushes of mushrooms right there. And so like just doubles the function. And I get a ton of free nutritious food right from uh, the ground all over in the compost piles, and yeah, it's wonderful.
And so oyster mushroom is a primary decomposer for that area.
Yep,
And
yep,
so you by incorporating, and it's not and it's not like all these like woody polypore mushrooms, you know what I mean, that take a long time to break down, and they're chitins like extra dense. This is like it's oyster mushrooms. So they're squishy and they break down very easily. They they cycle. Like that's what they're doing. They're cycling into organic matter really fast. That's really powerful. I think that that could be best practice, using a native and spore forming so that you're having spores form. Like, I mean, they're sporulating in there from the broken thing, like you said, but they're also, if they're forming mushrooms and you're letting them go all the way, they're sending out spores. So it's this full cycle of expression. I've never heard of that anywhere else.
Dude, once those spores open up, it's just insane how much life comes to it. And so like I let some of them open up for sure, and like I have an abundance, so I don't harvest them all to eat. But like when I do harvest the ones to eat, it's early, because if you let them open up and sporulate, there's so much life that just comes, and it's feeding everybody, and it's the medicine for everybody. And so like same things that make it medicinal for us, it's the medicine for all the ants that are eating it, and the beetles and everything. And so like, and then the birds are eating that. And like, the mycelium is the medicine of the forest, and it's pretty incredible.
That's super powerful too, because in seed saving, when you start saving seeds, and this was my experience when I first started transitioning from gardener to seed saver, you recognize, hey, wait a second, this is what it's all about. All the birds, all the beneficial insects have been waiting for you to let it go to flower.
Yep.
And then when you let it go to seed, there's also this like incredible expression. You're like, these seeds are unbelievably gorgeous.
Absolutely, man.
And it's like a very humbling thing. You're like, oh, I get it now. I've been doing it wrong. And like that 20%, like I always leave 20% or more of an area and have it totally go full expression, because I think it's so beautiful how you've got like the semi broken up, the broken up, and the unbroken up, because having that those layers of differentiation gets layers of expression.
Exactly. And good point about letting things go to seed. That's been a big realization this past year, is like we're composting on maybe like 2 acres of our 13-acre property, and the rest of it's just wildflowers and native plants and just wonderful oasis of life. And like there's so much pollen out there, and people come out and they're not used to being outside of their air conditioned house or whatnot, and they start sneezing. And so like, but like that pollen is so important, and like letting things go to seed and like realizing all the trillions of spores falling from the mushrooms and all the pollen flying, it's like that's going up and that's creating the clouds. It's giving something for the water particles to bind onto, and like just realizing how interconnected everything is absolutely amazing for sure.
Yeah, there's microbes that are riding on the wind with them.
Yep.
Like all sorts of things. I suspect that purple non-silver bacteria is actually in the air, especially close to large bodies of water.
Wow.
Yeah, because you saw the video. I found it in Johnson Sioux, right by the Great Lakes. So it's like middle of America, and it was actually on the Canadian side, middle of North America. And then the other was all West Coast. And so I'm gonna be testing the stuff that I build here, but I'm gonna set up a system similar to yours.
Awesome.
But I have like a few different things. Like, so are you DNA testing things?
No, I was literally just about to ask you if I can send you a sample and see if you can. Yeah. Because so I'm part of the Vermi Microbiome project. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's just getting started. Troy Hinkey from Living Roots Compost Tea invited me, but somebody else has some grant money and is DNA sequencing vermicompost from all over the country, and Wormies was asked to be a part of this, and so I'm super excited. But he did a little bit of testing last year. His name is Zach. I forget his last name, but so he does have some DNA sequencing, and I couldn't find the Rhodopseudomonas in there. And so I know that the PNSB is found in the biome of the gut, but who knows how extensive this testing is or whatever. But I'd like to see. I mean, I believe you in Quatamoc for sure, but
I think it's going to be in good compost, and it likely is in there for a specific reason.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
like how I was like rhizobia is the primary decomposer, and it's also inside like all the nitrogen fixing legumes, which means it's in the gut digestion. There's all these like different feedback loops, and
it's in the gut digestion of what?
Ruminants.
Okay, because they're eating the nitrogen fixing.
Yeah, and so it's fine going through there, and then when we know this because it goes through all of hot composting.
Right. And surviving volcanoes, like
Right,
yeah,
right. It's also going through EM compost. It's going through all of them just fine.
yeah,
So rhizobia selling you an inoculant, you know, online, like buying the inoculant for rhizobia, it's like, meh, you might not need to do that actually.
yeah. No, I feel the same way. But I feel
So
that way about like all these fancy inoculants and microbes in a bottle and stuff. It's like I bet if we DNA sequence the squirmies, like it'd have like all that stuff in there.
yeah, yeah, I
A lot.
really want to do it, and I want to. So are you doing microscope tests?
Yeah, got a couple people, but especially Organic Alexa, the co-host of the Michigan Compost Cup. She's really big into microscopy, getting into like the epifluorescence and stuff. So she's a big fan of your work as well. But yeah, it's
Heck yeah.
incredible the stuff that she shows me and the stuff that she sees in there. And the amount of slides that the whole entire soil food web is in one field of view. It's like we got some stuff rocking in here. Incredibly proud of it. So we just had Leighton Morrison out on Monday out to the farm, and he was scoping the compost, and it was a great time for sure. So
So I
fungal
want to add some fuel to your fire
yeah,
now. So I was told by a student that within weeks, E. coli, pathogenic E. coli is removed by worms. And I was
nice.
like, is that true? I don't know. Let me check that. And I didn't have like, like a Jamie to like look it up while we're alive or something.
Yep.
But I later on looked it up and the studies are pretty darn clear. I was looking for studies that proved it wrong and instead
Mhm.
found studies that proved it right. Because that's just,
Right.
how I do things. And so I was really surprised, but they do. And so it's a best practice as a business for and for everyone, I would say, to go from hot composting, letting it cool, and then adding the worms.
Yep. It just pathogen reduction totally. Like it cleans up anything in there. And I drank the compost extract and fully trust it, you know.
I have to just open up the epi. Um, I'd have to open up the thing on the Johnson Sioux worm compost. I do multiplexes when I do the DNA testing because I love to compare things because it's the only way
Yep.
I generate meaning is to be able to compare. And so I've got to look and see what's in there because I would say that it's important for the plants to like filter and choose the microbes for us to take in,
Yep.
especially with mycorrhizae as the gatekeepers on the roots. I don't know if mycorrhizae block pathogenic E. coli because all E. coli knows how to use endophytic keys to get in and persist.
Mm.
And so there's examples of pathogenic E. coli surviving the heat from a hot compost
Yep.
and then going inside of plants and then establishing itself like a regular endophyte would. Because
Wow.
commensal E. coli is everywhere, right? It's all over everything. It's 40% of all microbes on everything I test. Everything, everything.
Wow.
They're the actual information feedback loop, just like rhizobia is. They're primary to all decomposition, primary to all digestion. They are the word E. coli means like mammal. It's millions and millions of species, but they
Wow.
express in relation to the environment. So they take up genes from the. This is why people are like, oh no, you don't want to create an environment that will cause disease. Mm-hmm. They were completely right. It's horizontal gene transfer.
Yep.
So I'm really excited about this because you are modeling not just best practice, not just the way to do it so that there's the least amount of pathogens because you're doing both. It's not sterilization, both selection
Yeah.
processes.
Yep. And
And
spraying everything with EM, which can, eat toxins too. So yeah.
yeah, and it's so powerful. I mean, in EM blends, I'm finding, Acromobacter, which digests glyphosate, and everyone's like, oh, glyphosate's in the rain. And I'm like, but this actually digests it, you know,
Exactly.
and good compost, from what I'm seeing, has at least 1% Acromobacter, which is huge. You know what I mean? If you're regularly using it, you're regularly digesting Roundup. So there's such power in that kind of product that you're bringing. Are you inoculating it with any specific mycorrhizal like fungi, like arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, like AMF?
We haven't inoculated with any store-bought inoculants. I've done some not, I guess no, like mycorrhizal inoculants or anything like that. But having the plants in there, and they're flying through the wind and everything. I'd like to
Yeah.
get some proof that there's some connections going on, but I feel
So
like
it's so easy to start scaling it because what the professionals do, like Rodale Institute, like Mike
yeah,
Amaranthus, the creator of Mycorrhizae, the first mycorrhizal inoculant company, they literally turn the soil that they grow their initial plants in into the medium. So they do like half biochar, half compost.
okay.
And then they grow like a tropical grass, Bahia grass in a bag, and they inoculate that.
Which grass
And
was it?
Bahia grass,
Okay.
it's in
Yeah, yeah,
Regenerative
yeah.
Soil. There's like a whole
Yep.
graphic
No,
for it.
I've definitely seen it. Just I don't pronounce it like that when I read it. So,
Oh yeah. Well, my wife makes fun of how I pronounce everything, but it's all good.
oh,
It's all good. It's all good. But like the thing is, it's like you grow the grass, you let winter kill it, and then because of the stress, all it goes and just creates crazy amounts of spores. You just pull out the grass, well, you chop the grass, and then you just mix the whole bag up, and
yep.
that's inoculant. And so
I'm definitely.
it's so easy to do and scale.
You're supposed to start this like over winter, right? Did
I would
Did the book say
start
something
it.
about that?
I would start it in like midsummer, maybe
Okay.
late summer, because you don't want them to go to seed, but you want them to get like to the point where they're really robust and they're feeding out a lot of exudates, and then they get stressed and shocked. So
Okay.
where you're at, yeah, I would probably plant in in like mid to late summer. I would look at the weeks, whatever it says, the weeks, and then backtrack to where you have
Sure.
some time before it goes to seed.
Dude, when I said earlier when we were messaging, there's not enough time in the day for all the cool shit I want to do. Most of that cool shit is in your book. It's like I just want to do all those preps. It's so inspiring, man.
Oh, just
Very.
wait. I've got so many more. The thing is, and you are doing it like you are exactly what I keep telling people like is going to happen. It's like all these things that I like bring up and highlight that people are already doing, but putting into a system of understanding is going to allow people to improvise, allow people to adapt and to create and generate new expressions of the same ideas and niche versions of them.
Yeah,
And you've
exactly.
certainly done that. You absolutely are proving that out. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then you do know that like beer yeast is an endophyte, right?
Yeah, I was hearing you talk about that last night too. How,
Yeah.
yeah.
So your pile definitely has like rhizobia, definitely it has so many things in it. It's really,
Yep.
really amazing. I can't wait to test it and show folks.
Awesome. Me either.
And so have you considered like have you seen the database idea?
Yeah.
Have you
Yep.
considered like having Wormies participate in that and like have their like soil or their compost like on there so people can check it out?
That'd be incredible. I need to look into that a little bit further. But yeah, let's talk about that for sure.
Okay, yeah, because that would be like a way that people could like, because the thing is, it's all right. So the way to make things go really fast is to make it self-evident. And so if you have the highest, like best expression, the like best practices shown, then
Yep.
people can look at their compost and go, okay, I get it. The color of his compost is like 3 shades darker than mine.
For
Oh,
sure.
I get it. Look at like the crumb like texture of that. There's a fluency that comes that when we have that kind of different snapshots. You see the biology, you see the bricks and the bionutrient meter readings on the plants that, because I would love to for you to send me plants.
Yep.
Like because and I don't know if the bionutrient meter, I might just have to visit. Bring like the laboratory with me.
Dude.
Ah, but like that's the thing, is it's like to show folks that the best plants grow in the best soils, and the best soils are amended with, because I in my course I tell people compost is the ultimate carrier for anything that you want to do. It's like, you want to add biochar, do it with compost. It's like, you want to add EM, combine like EM with your compost, and it's like combine EM with, you know what I mean, your compost tea. But like, it's a carbonaceous carrier, right? And so you can push it this way or that way. And you actually, I also heard you talk about how you're going to be offering different kinds of compost, like more fungal dominant, more garden, more perennial.
Yeah, that's definitely on the list of stuff. So like we have two different siftings, and so we have like an 1/8 inch screen, which is going to be your traditional like vermi compost worm castings, but we don't call it worm castings because still there's so much more in there than just the worm casting. And so vermi compost a little bit looser, but and then we have the vermi mulch, and so that's a 1/4 inch screening, and so like a lot of tiny little wood chips get through. It's like they started off big couple inches wood chips, and now they're tiny little, almost micronized, and so like all that woody material gets through, all the worm cocoons, a bunch of worms, rove beetles, so many soil mites, shredders, and predators, the whole entire soil food web into like this mulch that is like the perfect start to. I still recommend using like a grass or something a little bit coarser to cover it up, some like hay or whatnot. But it's just going to be slowly breaking down, just a battery for your soil, all that organic matter that is still got some life into it and just coated with all those microbes and whatnot. It's like that stuff, after we sift it into the 1/4 inch siftings, we let it sit there and the mycelium just takes off in there. So like that's going to be more fungal dominant. That would be catered more towards plants that prefer fungal dominance, or the yeah, all that.
And that's gonna be like a 12-month or longer, or all your
Yeah.
piles are 12-month, right? Isn't that the case?
Yep. 10 to 12 months or so. Sometimes it's ready, in 10 months or so. But ideally, once we scale up, everything's going to be sitting for a whole year.
That's so important. And
Yep.
and when I was getting into permaculture, it was all about like how fast you can compost. It was all like faster, faster, faster.
No.
And at one point, there's like a Jeff Lawton video. I don't know if it still exists, but he's like the fastest compost garden ever, and he's got like a bucket of food, and he goes, throws it on the ground, and then like throws straw on it, and then throws compost on it, and then plants like all in the same 10
Dang.
seconds. And I was
Yep.
like, no, sir, wait. And it's like we got a little out of control, I
Yeah, it's
think,
not a race. Yep.
a little carried
Definitely
away.
recommend cold compost and doing all this like compost education and stuff. It's just like if you have the space for it, and so like that's the biggest thing, is there's so many different ways to compost off of everybody's unique situation. But like a lot of people, when they hear composting, they think the big hot piles and flipping it and 140 degrees and all that stuff. And it's like you don't need to do any of that in your small backyard pile. Just cold composting and retaining all that diversity is probably the way to go. Unless you've got a ton of biomass that you got to reduce, or you're trying to reduce pathogens from manure sources and whatnot. Like cold composting is definitely the best.
Yeah. And so speaking of education, you all have an extensive education outreach program.
Yeah, we're getting more into the education for sure. I co-hosted the Michigan Compost Cup last year, the first one, and we're planning it for this year. But I think we're going to change the name. The Compost Cup, it's not a competition at all. Nobody's got the best compost, because there's so many different situations, so many different applications for it. And like, yeah, so trying to get away from like any connotation, with egos and competitions like that, and just have it be a celebration of soil and life, and like just teaching people how to compost and build hugelkulturs and all these regenerative practices, while we're having a good time and listening to music, having drum circles around the fire. And like we have bioluminescent mushrooms up there, and so we
Heck
go out at
yeah.
night with UV lights, and like it's just an absolute blast, and great time to just have fun with
Is
all these
that
cool
Panella
people.
stypticus?
I'm not sure which one it is. I don't think it's that one. I'm not familiar with all of them, but I follow MycoFest, and I've seen some cool people with some bioluminescent mushrooms up there. But it's
Heck yeah.
definitely just one species up there, and tiny little. Yeah, I forget what it was, but there's a ton of mycologists in that community. It's like it's great to bring the mushroom community together with the soil nerds and the ganja growers, and like it's incredible. And like this year, it's going to be a little bit less focused on growing ganja and just focused on regenerating soil and growing everything, and like yeah. So it's so important to teach
That sounds
people
fun.
this, and like teach people how to teach people, or like how to teach their kids, because once we start teaching kids how to compost and like make it a part of their everyday life, it's like it's easy. It's like a lot of us adults need to unlearn things, and we're so used to these broken systems of sending organic matter off of our property and like just wasting that energy and paying somebody to rob us of our fertility. And like you can start viewing organic matter as energy and like a highly prized input, and like judge a man's wealth off of the size of his compost pile type thing. Like
Yeah.
big compost pile and fertile humus is the only sign of permanent wealth, and healthy soil is so important. So
It's
thank you so
absolutely,
much
it's
for
lifeblood. It's absolutely
yeah.
lifeblood. I'm so I've heard a lot about this compost cup. It's really, really awesome because it helps folks in a safe environment showcase what they're doing,
Yep.
get more education. That's what I'm really hoping to do with the soil database. And I am going to have rankings though for like most fungal, but I'm going to rotate it so that it de-emphasizes like individual, because the thing is with the metrics with compost, it's like A, what is it good for? B,
Yep.
um, you can't just have one of those metrics be, and then we don't know what those metrics are in relation to each other. Like
Yep.
what is like fungal dominance in relation to like nitrogen. Like there's a sweet spot right there, right? And
Yep.
so even if it's ammonium, right, there's a sweet spot. And so like we haven't mapped that all out yet. I brought up NPK testing in the middle of a talk, and it was crickets. And I was like, y'all never tested the nitrogen in your
Yep.
compost before using
That's a
it?
huge part of compost too. I know we get focused on all the microbial stuff, but it's absolutely still a ton of nutrients there and all sorts of stuff. So,
Yeah. And understanding what they are is really critically important because really good compost not only has everything that plant, because I mean, essential plant nutrients would imply that they're in plants.
yep.
So, like really good compost from really good plants and clean sources are going to have all the essential nutrients and minerals in an area, unless you're in certain parts of like Australia because they didn't have glaciation and whatnot. But you all are in the exact area where there
Yep.
was glaciation, where the
Mineral rich soil.
yeah, rock dust enriched
Yep.
soil essentially.
Glacial rock, that's for sure.
And so I would really recommend that everyone, can they mail orders like small amounts from you?
Yeah,
um
we're getting into that. So we haven't offered it in the past, but we're starting to ship out mother cultures, we're calling it. So like it's more than just isolated
Inoculant.
worms, it's everything. Like, and so I go out and I go through the chunky pile of all the wood chips, and like there's just huge chunks of mycelium, handfuls full, and they're just pulling all these different pieces together and forming aggregates. And so I go and like hand select the best of the best and ship it that day. And so yeah, the mother cultures are definitely the way to go, to add easiest way to bring dead dirt to living soil.
Yeah, and also to bring diversity to people's compost, because what I'm
Yeah.
seeing is like there are things that are everywhere. Like there's the top 10 primary decomposers, but there are literally all stars in all these different areas,
True.
and people who have compost that are at the next level seem to have like a greater diversity and a greater series of unique microbes. So I really think that like having like a, compost parties where you're bringing in different compost from the best of the best of the best and
Dude.
inoculating your piles is really, really powerful. And because of horizontal gene transfer and because of the way IMOs
Yep.
express dominance, it's not a dangerous thing to do, especially because you guys are doing all this due diligence. It's actually the best thing to do.
So I have mixed feelings about the IMO collection on rice grain, and I'd
Mm.
like to know, like, have you DNA sequenced IMO collections on rice before?
I have not, but the reality is that we would be growing out what's in the rice to a degree.
Yeah. So that's the main concern there is you're gently pasteurizing the substrate. You're not sterilizing it from like a mushroom cultivator standpoint. Like that grain is contaminated from the get-go, And so like we do have a buddy, a mycologist friend that is into DNA sequencing, and he's found really, really similar collections on, cultures from all over the state. And so I think a lot of it is like the yeast that's flying through the air. And a lot of these primary decomposers that are, the top 10, like you're saying. But as far as like complex, higher trophic levels of microbes from these actual native, like I don't know if we're culturing that, but
I was
we
using
have.
the term IMO more loosely to just mean like the indigenous microorganisms that are in situ.
Oh yeah, yeah, no doubt. And so like that's the thing too is a lot of people only think of IMO as the rice collection, but no,
Thank you
they're
for
everywhere. And
clarifying.
yeah, the compost has IMO all over it. Like it's connected with the ground. Of course, it's
Right.
got. Like, but where was I? So if this rice collection does work, and like we taught this at the last Compost Cup, and so like that's the thing. It's like we're constantly learning, and like really we don't know shit. Like we're scratching the surface of all this stuff, and like it's incredible what we're finding out. But like you got to have that. Uh, you got to be able to change your mind. But like, so we had this idea of having this Michigan IMO, and so like everybody collects the IMO from all over, and so like now that I'm saying that out loud, like it doesn't need to be the rice collection. It could just be, indigenous microbes from all over. So everybody can bring their own compost or whatever. And then we mix it at the Compost Cup. So like you have this Michigan IMO, so Mimo, and then we'd mix it all together and make Primo, Mimo. But it's just like an idea that we're talking about for the cup is mixing everybody's compost, and you have that horizontal gene transfer, and like you just, yeah, you get maximum diversity. But
And
also,
and I would include in that a handful of soil. Like if they were get
absolutely.
like just like a clean handful of soil to add into that compost. That's one of the natural farming like things they do in one of the IMO steps. Because there's like five, right? With different preps. And so they get native soil from like the dry area, the wet area, the sunny area, the shade, and they try to collect the soil, the physical soil. And
Yep.
like when I first heard that, I was like, people are gonna harvest all the soil. They're only doing that in Oregon. But but that's completely different. That's because the mushrooms. But um yeah, so I really think that that is something that's super key because you're gonna get things that just aren't in the other consortiums at all.
For sure. And so like there is that concern with wildcrafting soil or forest litter or whatever, but like I feel like if you're going out there with respect and like you're not just going out there to extract, you actually go out and you spend time and you bring a separate bag and pick up trash, and like maybe even if you pick up some soil, you put some compost that from your house there and like fill that gap, and never leave these bare patches. But like I think wildcrafting can absolutely be sustainably done, like um for these, yeah. So there's always that concern, and like you never want to go out and extract things from nature, but you can do it with so much respect and learn so much while you're out there. Just living it.
Yeah. I love that. That is amazing.
Um,
So, so do you guys have a website online for Wormies that people can check this out?
yeah, for sure. And we're doing some more work on it. There is some info out there, but thewormies.com, and then our Instagram is at wormiesgr. And so there's
And if people wanted that sample inoculant, maybe that like 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 20, I don't know, but like that smaller amount that you'd ship, who would they have to contact?
DM Wormies on Instagram, or you could DM me. Doesn't matter. But
That's
yeah,
perfect.
for sure.
So what do you have in the like plan for the future? Like what do you have like on your docket for what's next with the piles? Like what are you going to add in?
Oof. Um, Trying to get some I forget what they call it, some wood shavings. I just toured a neighbor farm, and they had all this wood that was untreated and everything, in these tiny, tiny little pieces. And I want to start using that as bokashi, because like everybody uses grain for bokashi, and so like I think using a more complex mixture of grain and basically sawdust, or these tiny little bit pieces, or bigger than sawdust but smaller than wood chips, like um, that'd be another interesting food source and a long-term food source, and more complex, carbohydrates than the grain itself. And so it's I think having just like breaking up the mycelium into different chunks and having it in different cycles. You need that fast releasing, but you also want that slow releasing food source, and like just creating different mixes of bokashi, and that includes like having some biochar mixed in as well. And so getting more and more into biochar. We just moved out to this new farm, and there's a ton of wood material out there, and there's wood waste all over the city, that more loops for us to close. And so like been talking with Quadamoc, and we've already made biochar, 3 or 4 times now. And so like we have a good amount accumulated. We're using it in the garden and everything, but we're ready to start putting it in the compost, putting it in the bokashi mixes, and using it all over. So
Yeah, so with the biochar, like I know that there's like that chunk size that everyone's like, you got to maintain the specific size. It's good habitat, holds water, but the dust makes the microbes go nuts.
yeah, they like that micronized stuff too.
Yeah. And so like when you're making it at the end, when you have all that dust, and like I know that there's like people online who are like, no, that's the dust is not the stuff to use, but that's the stuff to use,
Yeah,
especially when you're doing like EM brews. And
toss some of that in there.
yeah,
Okay,
and
so I've been thinking.
especially you know how to like break the surface tension on like things, right?
Uh, I mean, like surfactants, or what do you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like if you do that, and like I use hyperdrive, which is like all food like it's food
Okay.
grade material, and like I've even gotten it in my eyes. Michael Whitman's friend Richard created it, and I only know a few of the ingredients, but they're all secret. But like
Yeah.
it's made of food. It's genius, and like many of us in the industry like probably could guess like a lot of the things, but it's a
Right.
surfactant essentially that causes it to be a neutral surface so that things can absorb really easily. I
Okay.
was like, what happens when we put it with biochar? It
Ooh.
ate my EM ate the biochar. And I was like, it wasn't even dust. I used dust the second time and the whole thing like foamed. But it was like, yeah. So like EM, I was like, wait a second. The EM now has black carbon in it. And I was like, this is going to electrically change like everything. And so it's like we're always like I mean, you've probably seen like Quadamuk's like amazing technique where he takes the right growth cycle nitrogen form, puts it in with EM in an extension, right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
makes amino acids that are per that level of growth. So genius. Quadamuk's
Absolutely.
amazing. And he's been teaching that for years, just openly. So I just want to honor him for that. But I was like playing with that, and I started adding things in. I was like, well, we should put like kelp in there because we want to load these things up. And then And then I was like, what happens? Because Michael Whitman puts biochar caps on his compost piles so that all the CO2 and all of the gases that come off are actually captured in the biochar cap.
Wow.
And this has been proven to work.
So just
So
like an inch or two, or how much do you think?
I think that would depend on how deep your pile is
Sure.
and then how much nitrogen you're losing, right?
Right.
And so he's the first person I saw doing what you do, which is aerating the pile from below and having a static pile.
Yep.
I don't know how many years he's been doing it. I filmed his pile, his whole system like 7 years ago, 6 years ago now. And he just always puts this, he's the biochar man. He always puts a biochar cap on it. And then when he moves it to the next stage, he mixes it all in together. But he was
Nice.
so worried about the CO2 release in composting that he started using the biochar to capture it. So biochar
I love it.
caps, yeah, I think, and then you have the biochar there also loaded with nutrients suddenly
Exactly.
for the next stage in the worms. And I've heard that for worms, it's like grit for their gizzard.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I'm
it's
sure
like,
they love that small stuff.
yeah, yeah.
That's a great idea, man. We'll have to start capping some piles. Heck yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to like add in any way that I can because you all are doing exemplary work. I mean, this is really, I mean, it's so fitting that you're running the Compost Cup because you're a leader in this, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I always talk about how I mean, like there's this is an open field. Like there's so much work to be done. Like we talked about before, like there's never time to do all the things that are in our heads. And
Yep.
it's like what's so incredible is it's like I was thinking about things and then like you completed the thought and then went further with the thought and your whole team and Wormies and Beer City Bokashi, like all of it, you're manifesting that. And that's what we really need. We need people to co-create our visions. And do you meditate?
Oh yeah.
Okay. That might be part of it.
Yep.
So many
Manifesting
of us
all this stuff.
are.
Yep.
Oh man. But I think that's part of it too, is that we're all touching the same space and we're learning from the same we're learning from nature and we're learning from what is best practices and we're opening our hearts to what is the actual pathway for progressing through understanding of these spaces. And I feel like your example, sharing your example the way you guys do, is so powerful because it allows people to try it out and iterate it and do their own version and explore further but at the same time showing what is true, what really works, and liberating people from that doubt. So many people are like, maybe, I wish, I hope, I don't know though, and it tears them up. We live in a world of uncertainty already, and it's
Absolutely.
like this is so awesome. I mean, for me personally, like I get so much peace from knowing how powerful the right way, the natural way is, and then how every time I'm under the microscope, every time I'm talking to someone like you, I learn more, and it pulls my understanding further, and it all fits and it actually deepens. So thank you.
Thank you, man. I really, really appreciate you.
Well, we all appreciate you, Chandler. It's amazing. Really is. All right. So everybody go visit Wormies.
Yeah. So I wildcraft mushrooms all the time. So we talked
Yeah.
about, using the gourmet mushrooms, but I do use polypores in there too. Some really, really medicinal tree medicine, some earth medicine that's been mining these trees that have been mining the soil. And so like, creating this mushroom medicine is like looking at it like, okay, the tree is 100 years old, and now this mushroom comes along as the tree's dying, and now it's mining all that stuff out of the tree. And the tree's been mining the soil for, or the soil's been turning for thousands of years. But like,
Mm.
so you realize like that medicine is, thousands of years in the making. And so like all like the little butt ends from the pieces of reishi and, any scraps from these incredibly medicinal polypores, they end up getting fermented with the EM. And like the scraps end up in the compost pile, but also spraying all that stuff. And like, we do use turkey tails as well. I left that one out, but because of regenerative soil, I saw that turkey tails shown to clean up glyphosate too. And so we're teaming with the turkey tail. We haven't found black pearl oysters yet. I know that's another one in there, but yeah, using the polypores as well. I meant to mention that earlier.
That's awesome. You know what? They were testing centenarians or centenarians in Japan and their gut biome, and they all had one unique microbe that only old people that like live this long have,
Huh.
and it's created by reishi when we consume
Mushroom
it.
of immortality.
And so, but let's go further. What you just said opened another door. What if, because this is what Peter McCoy says, so many of the medicinal compounds are not actually the plant, they're the fungi in the plant. What if the
Yep.
component, the information, right, or literally the fungi from within that tree is getting information and medicine from, you know what I mean? Like there's a feedback loop there that's so ancient.
Absolutely, man. And I'm just getting into this, thinking about the soil having memory, and Quatermack teaching this with the biochar. Um, but like that's what biochar is, and that's what happens naturally when we have these wildfires or lightning strikes a tree and turns it to char and puts it in the soil. It's like it's that memory of the tree that was there before, and like it's absolutely incredibly beautiful. And like we don't begin to understand the complexities of all this stuff.
Orchids can grow with reishi. You know that, right? And orchids
No,
require a mycorrhizal inoculant to grow at all.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so you can actually use reishi to do this. And so that
Wow.
means reishi goes in. And I think that reishi would already, and then like, reishi's cousin, like artist conch and all those kinds of
Yep.
things. Those are already inside the plant. And so they're gathering information and probably endophytic. And so they're in a feedback loop and calibrating that whole time. And then when it dies, they're turning into this mushroom, which is like potentially, not saying for sure, this is just
Yep.
me riffing here, but it's like a synopsis of information, which is and of medicine, right? It's a
Yep.
distilling of this essence from this ancient tree that now we are able to take as medicine. That's pretty incredible.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a gift. Thank you for sharing that. I love that.
Thank you. Teaming with these trees and using the wood chips, what other vermi compost, what other like wood or worm composting company is feeding their worms wood chips? It's like, obviously we're not going for the speed of things, we're catering towards the fungi there, but like one tree could have 100 different strains of fungi living inside of it, and like inside of that fungi, there's bacteria floating around. Inside that bacteria, there's a virus. Inside that virus, there's another virus, and like it just gets incredibly complex. And like you don't just look at the wood chips as carbon anymore, you look at it as all those endophytes that are turning into saprobes, as the environment changes, the function changes. And like it's
Have you thought about insect frass?
oh yeah. Yeah.
Because that would
I,
make chitinase at like super high levels. And I know people doing worm castings with insect frass as a main component, and they're using that to melt bark beetles and save dead trees.
they're using it to what?
Melt bark beetles and save
Okay, bark
trees.
beetles. Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
because it's so high in chitinase.
Right. No, we talked about getting into the frass game for sure, but like the fact that um the compost is right on the ground, and those mushrooms are sporulating and attracting all those beetles. It's like there's so much more than just worm castings, and that's why we don't call it, worm castings. Like there's insect frass in there naturally. There's so many beetles and everything in our pile.
Do you know the Amino K Sugars test?
No.
So basically, someone really smart figured out that there's these farmers that are growing corn where it shouldn't be possible. And they're not using any fertilizer, and it shouldn't be possible what they're doing. And everyone thought it was magic. And then they went and looked closer, and they figured out that there was so much insect frass that it was amino K sugar, or amino sugars, amino nitrogen sugars, and they it's basically from insects, and it's like their leftover insect parts. It's chitin, and so it's a form of protein that's non-soluble.
Yeah.
Right. Until there's these roots that are like putting out all these exudates at the right calibration. And so, yeah, I really think that if you did an amino K sugars test, I mean, I don't know why I say K. It might be because, well, anyway, but amino nitrogen sugars, it's in the book. Okay. It's in Regenerative Soil. But if you did that, you would be able to see the amount of nitrogen that's non-soluble that's in there in a form that's like essentially like in reserve. Very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you know who offers that test?
Yeah. You know Solvita?
Yep.
They do they're part of the Haney test that everyone's into now. Yeah. Solvita has home kits. And I've got the gardener kit from them. It was like $100, and I can do the CO2 respiration, and I can do the nitrogen respiration test. And then they have the amino sugars test too. It's a separate kit. So yeah, and what's so wild is they've got a digital reader, and I'm like, that's what these are for, dude. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like we're like, someone's just got to care enough, and we're going to be able to have programs that read the color coding on those things so that we get such, because he's getting precise readings with the digital reader, except it costs $1,500. So it's like, hard sell. Like, wait 5 minutes, it'll be here.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't wait to like hang out, meet in person, talk compost, make compost, maybe attend your event. I don't know.
Dude, that'd be a dream come true.
Yeah. Oh man,
that'd be incredible.
Yeah. So everyone, check out what you're doing. I want to come and in person and check out and film it and make like a documentary on you guys, because it's just amazing. It's absolutely inspiring. So thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. Truly been an honor. Oh man, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. You're doing such great work.
Wow. Man, this has been crazy. Like, you seriously have taught me so much. So I highly look up to you. And
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Is it just from the book, the Regenerative Soil book?
Yeah, getting more into your YouTube, but to be honest, I haven't too much in the past, and I'm seeing there's so much content out there. So another rabbit hole to dive down. But yeah, this book is a Bible. I've got a huge library next to me here with all the soil books, and like I recommend to everybody, instead of getting all of those, just get this. It summarizes the Teaming with Microbes trilogy. It's got the Rodell composting book, like everything in here, man. The Jadam book, like, yeah, it's all summarized perfectly and illustrated amazingly, and like such an interactive, and like just this book. And I mean, gardening has always been piquing my brother's interest, but like this book has been our Bibles. Like, he's in Minnesota, I'm in Michigan, but like, yeah, it's awesome, man. So thank you so much.
That's incredible.
And I think I just heard you last night. You're writing a new book, Mind, Body, and Soil.
Yeah, because and so it's been something I've been researching. So what happens is, it's like some things take me a long time to research, and some things I have to do in order, because the pieces, I can't figure out the next piece until I do this part. So I'm figuring out the soil, and the only way to get to the rest of the information is by making it a community experience. And especially like mapping and proving things out. And then I'm going to start interviewing doctors and then I've got to write the third book in the trilogy, the Regenerative Soil trilogy, Regenerative Soil DNA, because like all the things I just told you, people are going to be like, Matt, I don't know if I believe you, but if I have it in a book and I've got the printouts for dozens of DNA samples from all over that are showing this pattern, then it's completely different. And so I'm gonna showcase it out and show how things actually work, because of horizontal gene transfer, they now know that evolution is not the primary mechanism for adaptation. It's horizontal gene transfer, and at least microbially. Yeah. And so I really want to like people to understand how decomposition actually works, how gene expression actually works, and then I want to go into the gut and connect it, because they have to connect. If we have these all connected and make it undeniable, then we fix the entire food system.
Absolutely, man. That's a huge part of the Compost Cup that I didn't leave it, or I didn't include, but like the human health aspect, like bridging the gaps between soil health and human health, and like talking about fermentation for, our health, as well as fermenting our inputs for the garden, and like just how similar everything is, and waking everybody up to the microbiome and getting everybody on the same page for sure.
Yeah, everything's about to change.
Dude, that is so exciting.
All right, I'm gonna send it to you right now. It is so awesome to meet. I can't wait to hang out in person.
Me either, man. Truly.
All right. Well, have a wonderful day, and I'm gonna get this out really quick.
Take care, Matt.
You too. Have a great one.
You too.
Regenerative Soil Microscopy is a manual for how to explore, assess, and evaluate your soil, your compost, your roots, mycorrhizae and microbes, and more. And it's all stepped out. So it's visual, it's also written, but you'll be able to follow along like a picture book and copy the steps. You'll be able to learn how to operate a microscope. You'll be able to learn how to work with stains. You'll be able to learn bright field, dark field, epifluorescence, all the most powerful modes of microscopy. You'll have at your fingertips. And you'll be able to capture, catalog, assess, and evaluate, and then make clear choices and decisions to improve that soil. And it's going to take a public database to organize this information so that we can run this data against itself, and that we can expose all these caveats and connections and get nearly an infinite amount of feedback and insight possibilities out of over 100 points of distinction that you can run against each other, as well as DNA. So the DNA sequencing is going to unlock things even more and allow us to understand microscopy at such a deeper level. We're going to be able to check our answers, but when 1,000 or 100,000 entries have been entered and we start connecting these things and going across bioregions, across pH, it will open the door to data that no scientist has ever had access to before. And it's going to be public, so we all have access to it, so that information doesn't get locked up. But I need you to know how to operate your microscope and to catalog these things and interpret these things so that you can add to the database and be part of this. So I built an online community, training, and certification program that dovetails and goes deeper than the textbook. So we're there working together. There's live Q&A. There's live demonstrations, and there's an online community where you can connect with people from all over the world interested in soil science. A new horizon in soil science is upon us, and you're all invited to participate. And remember, it's a Kickstarter, so if you don't support it, it doesn't happen. Get Regenerative Soil Microscopy, the book, the course, and join us in the Our Soil database.